everyone, Kathy here and welcome back to my channel. Today I would like to introduce you to my friend Aurelia Sawula. Aurelia was born in a small town called Lady Frere in a former Bantustan located in South Africa. For anyone who doesn't know what a Bantustan is, it was a territory set aside for the black people of South Africa and Southwest Africa as part of the policy of Apartheid. The town was named after Sir Bartles Frere, governor of the Eastern Cape frontier during the 19th century, and the Transkei region was indeed the birthplace of many freedom fighters such as Nelson Mandela himself and Miriam Makeba, to name a few. I met Aurelia in 2014 while we were both enrolled in Aix-Marseille University in France and were preparing for our bachelor's degree in English-speaking civilizations and communications. Together, we went through literature, history of art, phonetics, and grammar classes. We studied online and presented exams on site while also working full-time and living our lives as grown-up women. Good afternoon, Aurelia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on your channel. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. So, you went through so much in your lifetime and you're still smiling. I'm really grateful that you come in today. So, first of all, as just mentioned, you were born and raised in South Africa. You survived poverty, hardship, and the apartheid, and so much more. So can you please tell us a little bit more about your childhood and why it was so hard for your mom to raise you then and there?
Well, my life began, I was premature, intolerant to maternal milk, and fatherless. My grandparents were farmers, but leaving the family cluster and protection was hard for someone like my mother. So for 8 months, my mom tried to find solutions, having to face judgment because 3 children, 3 different fathers, but for her daughters to be accepted as her parents' children, she had to leave. Since I was still a baby, I was taken to my eldest aunt to live in one of the Apartheid township brick houses in Port Elizabeth. At the age of 2, I integrated a primary school where my aunt had colleagues because no one could look after me at home. That year, I was first in class, but because I was a girl, I had to take the second place after a boy. But living under apartheid had its flaws. When the police came looking for a suspect, our location was regularly tear gassed.
Aurelia, I'm sorry, which town were you living in at that time?
It was called Uitenhage. It's about an hour from Port Elizabeth.
Okay.
The location was regularly tear gassed. They would raid the whole neighborhood, beating at the metal doors at 2 in the morning.
But I'm sorry, for the idiots that I am, what were they looking for? Who were they looking for? What was happening? Can you explain to us a little bit?
Actually, they were looking for political activists, and sometimes it would be someone who stole something in a store, in a shop. Sometimes it was just people who looked like someone who looked like a suspect to the police. They would tell the police that, oh, this person is a political activist.
Okay.
And things like that happened regularly.
So I'm sorry, let's go back to this. You said that they would come in the middle of the night and there were helicopters?
Yes, and the apartheid houses, they were made from brick, but the doors were in metal, and it was deliberate because they were very noisy. So when the police came knocking on the door, the whole house would just wake up. And there was no way of going around that, and they would just barge in. You didn't have privacy as a family. They didn't mind whether there were children or not in the household. It was normal.
Were they brutal to you all, or?
They came in the middle of the night. People were half dressed, or they were wearing very minimal clothing just for sleeping. And mostly they would just push the children aside, and the parents would be quite brutally spoken to because it was the language of order.
Okay. It's just unbelievable for all of us who have not lived through this. So you grew up in with your aunt and you were able to go to school, but you also lived in fear, basically.
Yes, there was a lot of fear. We were more afraid of white people because you couldn't offend a white person, otherwise you might end up somewhere. And sometimes people would just disappear and you wouldn't know why. And I remember an uncle of mine disappeared and he had his head eaten up. So things like that happened all the time. And it was just because he looked like a suspect.
Wow, it just. Okay, so you grew up. When did you leave South Africa?
Well, I left South Africa in 2001.
So it was after the apartheid. Was the situation much safer at that
Uh,
time?
well, I wouldn't say it was safer. It was a different type of violence.
Yeah.
But with the new middle class, violence also rose because all of a sudden there were new rights came with unpunished crime.
I see. So you call them Bantustan. They were destroyed, right? So blacks and whites were able to live together.
I wouldn't say that. White people still don't live in the townships today. There are very, very few white people who will move into a black township, less than 1%.
So after suffering through this and after all the brainwashing, I'm sure that they were doing also on the white side, I'm guessing you don't stop racism from one day to the other saying, okay, now we are allowed to live together, let's not be racist. When you left, was racism still strong?
I think racism, it will take maybe 20 or 30 years for racism to slow down because you still have racist people, but South Africans are perhaps less radical today. Racism is more economic in my sense today than it was during the apartheid.
Wow, what a childhood. So on the higher note, on the fun note, you are not living in the south of France, and you have built a good life for yourself. This is, where I met you. Can you please tell me? So you said that you came in 2001, but what brought you to the south of France? Especially, you didn't move to a big city. You moved to a little town in the south. So what happened there?
Well, moving from South Africa to France was motivated by violence. I had been shot and held hostage for 7 hours, so I became a little bit paranoid. But what also motivated me was new country, new job opportunities, and learning a new language.
So was Europe the way you had imagined it? Did you feel welcome and at home right away, or how did it go?
Oh, I didn't speak the language, so obviously my whole life in South Africa, South Africans are known to be very arrogant. So my arrogance really took a blow. And so I really had trouble laughing at people's jokes because I didn't find them funny when they were translated from French to English. I had to like smile or a big smile or ha 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 ha.
So you, like I said, you move in a very small town. So how did you? And these people in small towns, they don't speak English, most of them. So how did you learn French?
Well, since I didn't speak the language and anything else, well, I decided I had to learn the language at least. So, per chance, there was a government program that taught foreigners to speak or to go around in French, how to sign a check or how to say hello at the bakery or, how to go around in the supermarket and identify objects.
So basic integration skills, basically.
Integration skills, that's the term. So that was really a good thing. And I did 2 3 months courses. And at the end of my 6th month, I was fluent in French, basically because I watched a lot of TV, programs like Friends. I watched Friends all the time.
In French.
in French. And it was really weird because when I looked at Rachel, I said, oh goodness, if she was speaking English, she'd say that. Sometimes following her lips, I said, oh no, I don't think that's what she wanted to say in French. So I was arguing with the television. And and I read a lot of children's novels. I read the dictionary a lot, so that I could say words. And sometimes I just bump into someone and say a word. And if they really answered me, then I'd say, wow, super, that word really works. One that I learned today.
That's funny.
Yeah, so that's the way I learned French. And
So now, what about your career path? You said that when you were a child and you were in South Africa, you were brilliant in school. I'm guessing you went back to school, but that we will talk about it later. But how did you find a job in France, and how did you learn to become a self-employed clothing designer? That's who you are, you're a clothing designer. That's super exciting. So tell me that.
well, let's say that I'm going to try and find a job related to my former studies to become a graphic designer. So I decided to see if I could start a business. And in my little town, there was a small shop that was closed. And so I went to find out who it belonged to. And looking at people, I found that they were dressed in dull clothes. You know how it is in Africa, people are always wearing bright colors. And well, I learned to wear dark clothes too because it's normal.
So you brought South Africa in your little village in the south of France. That is amazing.
I brought bright colors to my little village.
That is really cool.
It all started with the Jewish section in Paris because mostly Jewish people used to create fashion. So, well, I went there and I found some very nice manufacturers who taught me many, many things about how to work around the clothing area. Because I didn't even know how to sew, so it was quite an adventure. And well, I learned a lot from them, and I started looking at what was wrong with using non-natural material. So I wanted something more natural and lots of cotton. Well, we wear a lot of cotton in Africa. So I decided to try and adapt their skill to what I wanted. When Italy started to open up, I found a whole new world that made your creations possible. They printed colors and they made things according to your desires. So that's how my adventure started.
So you had to find all the distributors and the sellers, and that's unbelievable. And it's a country that is not yours. It's a little town. You're going all around the place with the Jewish community in Paris and Italy, and here you are. You're something else. It's unbelievable. I'm very impressed. So now, as I mentioned earlier, you and I met in college in Aix-en-Provence. We passed our bachelor's degree together with the grapes of wrath. You remember?
Yes, I do.
That oral exam. So basically, we had the choice between the grapes of wrath or English poetry. So we got a little lucky there. And then. And then we moved on to the master's degree with 2 full theses to write in French and in English. So one of your theses was about the influence of missionary education in South Africa. You went around and interviewed people. You had to live all your past again and write about the unfair treatment done to your society. Can you please tell us a little bit more about this thesis? This is super interesting.
Well, I was interested in how it became a multi-ethnic and multiracial country, and also how it became globalized. Because I figured that, we have so many European norms in my country. We move to any country in the world, we feel at home because we're used to that. Nelson Mandela inspired me to write something about how they led the country after having been behind prison for such a long time, and especially what justified their position in society, what were their qualifications. And that's how I ended up with missionary education. and missionaries in general. Missionaries came into a country that had its own civilization. But in my history books, those civilizations had never existed. They were just part of the environment, like furniture in a house. So I was quite interested in how it began. So I decided to focus on three different South African leaders who trace the history of missionary education since the 19th century. So I ended up with firstly Theo Soga. He was the first reverend in South Africa. And it is through his family that we discover how British missionaries took over. They introduced literacy into Xhosa language, and they also introduced European education. And we see how the British government actually took over from the missionaries' success by converting the Africans, teaching them how to read, write, and count, because they were always presented as if they had never had education. Whereas I discovered that actually there was a civilization before. So it traces that part and how the Xhosa society engaged in negotiations with missionaries to learn. They were interested in technology and new techniques, and each time wars were provoked. If the indigenous peoples won, the British people would come with even more arms, more weapons, and they would sort of destroy whole communities and then take the land. I also discovered how missionaries converted the elite of the royal family, and others were part of the royal family. The second person is Albert Luthuli. He was the first Nobel Peace Prize in South Africa.
Okay.
And he met with Bobby Kennedy, and he made a lot of conversations with Martin Luther King. And his impact in South African pacification, and he brought the international dimension into missionary education. And he was a convert, that is true, but he went back to his roots in order to have respect from the learned community and the community that refused modernity. Mm-hmm. And the third person, and the last, is Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and he's a direct descendant of Shaka Zulu, and he's chief of the Buthelezi clan. So if, for example, the Zulu king or his family were decimated for some reason, he could be acting king of the Zulu tribe in South Africa. And during apartheid, he began as a clerk, and he had a privileged relationship with the authorities to negotiate. And he was more of a traditionalist because of his family's past, but he was mission educated and extremely refined. And as a prince, his voice is extremely powerful in South Africa. He met with Margaret Thatcher. He was a controversial figure. So I was interested in how he palliated his Western living and his traditional values. Of the three people, he's the only one who used his traditional education to lead.
So when you mean missionary, it's synonym with colonization. The English came, they colonized South Africa.
Yes, they're very close. The thing is that missionaries were religious institutions. Therefore, their idea was, first of all, to follow Enlightenment principles. But it appears that from the mid-19th century upwards, they showed signs of imperialism and started embodying principles of social Darwinism and started seeing the natives that they were trying to empower in the beginning as people that they could actually use for their own service. And then gradually, the colonial government became government agents. Therefore, they used their power over the natives. People who really trusted them, and they used their knowledge of them to help the colonial government crush them, especially when they were resisting.
Now, Aurelia, when you say that religion was a factor, does it mean that they forced you to become Christian as well?
Well, growing under apartheid, you did have to have a religious sign. You know, I used to have what you called a dumpas, just a paper with your photo on, and it gives your particulars, where you were born, etc. And you also had to have my religion. So systematically, I was Roman Catholic, and it totally denied my other religious identity, because in Africa you also have spirituality, and it was sort of considered as paganism by the missionaries.
Yes, it's just so already this thesis it seems is super interesting. So if anyone out there would be interested in reading it, can I put your contact details and then you can see with them how to send it to them, or because it sounds so interesting. It really does. It's unbelievable. And not only that you wrote it, but you went through this, so it's a part of yourself that you put on this document. So it's amazing. It really is. But now that you own a master's degree, you're a master in civilizations and communications. What is next? What are you going to do with that beautiful diploma of yours?
I have no idea, to be honest.
That's exactly what I said to myself, and I'm still not doing anything with mine.
We have so many possibilities. I was thinking of doing something, an educational in my home country, in the rural farmlands like those of my grandparents, which were forerunners before apartheid. Today, schools are under-equipped. When children leave those schools, they don't always know what to do with themselves. So most of the time, they'll go to the big cities. And one of the projects that I really am interested in is creating agricultural schemes there, because the land is extremely interesting. I had it tested, and I know I can do several types of agriculture there. So I'd like to monitor something like that. I don't know. I have so many things in mind. Anything's possible. And I'm also interested in research. So,
the sky is the limit. Well, research, this is your master's, so you can go into a PhD there. That would be amazing. That would be awesome. I'm sure all our teachers will be super excited to have you back, You're here, you're back. You can't live without us. But Aurelia, what strikes me the most is you went through so much trauma, and you were always able from childhood to get back on your feet. But what does strike me the most is the fact that you're always smiling, and it doesn't look like you're holding any anger, and which you could have anger, you could live hating the whole world for what happened to you, but this is not your philosophy. How do you turn all this trauma into positive that you always bring?
To be honest, I don't think being angry is a solution, because you create a violent atmosphere. You don't get anything. It's not rewarding to be angry. It just pushes people away, and people will tend to put you in a block. So I believe that it's rather by showing that we deserve respect and tolerance, because we distribute love and harmony. And nothing else. If you show people that you're capable of tolerance, love, harmony, integrity is the next step. People learn to respect you, and I think it means the world. That's the way you show people anything. You don't fight. You don't burn things down. You just be yourself and show that you have an education. You went to school for such a long time, and your family environment taught you things as well. So by showing your peacefulness, your tolerance, you don't need to be angry. And I'm sure that's the way I got things in life.
Wow. Okay, lesson learned, everyone. Everyone who is whining because, my coffee was not hot enough this morning. Here we go. Now I have one more question for you, and I'm dying to know. Let's say tomorrow you're going back to South Africa and you're a diplomat, or what are you going to bring back from that little town of France? Because you live in the south of France and you changed every single inhabitant there. I'm sure everyone will remember you and miss you. But what are you going to bring back and cherish when you are back home? if you go back home, but let's say you do when you're retired, you're old and gray. What are you going to bring back?
Well, I believe French people are they're so proud of their country, their food. Speak to any French person anywhere in the world, the first conversation is food.
Don't forget wine.
And wine.
That's what we live for.
And I find that extraordinary. And some people are, even if people moan, but I find it quite charming because they moan about things, ordinary things. And
That's funny.
I find it really, really amazing. And so I would love to take that back with me and really appreciating the environment, nature, especially in Southern France.
That's awesome. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much, Aurelia. Thank you for all your time. I'm really grateful you got to speak with us today, and it was very interesting. I just would like to apologize. The sound might not be perfect at times, but it is just so interesting. I really hope everyone will enjoy, because Aurelia is about 6,000 miles away from me. So please forgive the sound. But thank you so much, Aurelia. That was awesome.
It was a pleasure to be here, Kathy, and thank you for everyone who listens. I hope you really found it interesting.
I know we will hear much, much more from you. And again, if anyone out there is interested in reading your thesis, please let us know, because it's really interesting.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'll be delighted to share.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's it for today. If you, just like Aurelia, are interested in participating in one of our future recordings, if you have questions or if you would like to share your adventure with us, please do contact me at bbonklodi@gmail.com. Stay tuned for our next episode, and always remember to be kind to each other.